2 films, 2 visions of Exodus, 2 films, 2 visions, yes. But let's not mistake them for mere entertainment. These are acts of cultural theology, attempts to wrestle with the very heart of Revelation. We are not simply comparing cinematic styles. We are witnessing 2 distinct theophanies, manifestations of God. One, in the Prince of Egypt, is a symphony of light and sound, a visceral experience of God's presence, almost as if the very fabric of creation is vibrating with the divine. It's a vision that echoes the mystical traditions, where God is encountered in the ecstatic, the transformative. The other, in Exodus, Gods and Kings, feels almost like a clinical observation, a stark, almost dispassionate encounter. It's a vision that speaks to our age of doubt, where God seems veiled, distant, perhaps even hostile. Consider the implications. In one, the divine is a collaborator, a force that ignites the human spirit. In the other, it's a force that demands obedience, that seems to operate outside human understanding. This isn't just about how the bush looks. It's about how we perceive God's relationship with humanity. Is it a partnership, a covenant of love? Or is it a master-servant dynamic, a relationship defined by power and submission? We stand, as I said, at the crossroads of interpretation. This story, the Exodus, is not a fixed historical event. It's a living, breathing mythos. A narrative that continues to resonate because it speaks to the core of the human condition. It's about the yearning for freedom, the struggle against oppression, the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unjust. And at the heart of it all is the question of God. Who is this God who intervenes in human history? Is it the God of intimate encounter, the God who walks with us in the desert? Or is it the God of inscrutable power, the God who remains shrouded in mystery? The paradox of the burning bush. The burning bush. That paradoxical image. A bush that burns yet is not consumed. A symbol of God's presence that is both terrifying and beautiful, both near and far. It's a reminder that God is not bound by our categories, that the divine transcends our understanding. In the Prince of Egypt, the bush is a swirling vortex of divine energy, a call to intimate communion. It's almost as if the very air is charged with God's presence, as if the flames are a conduit to the divine heart. In Exodus, Gods and Kings, the bush is a barren, almost desolate thing, a sign of a God who seems to have withdrawn. It's a reminder that God is not always comforting, not always reassuring. Sometimes the divine encounter is a confrontation, a challenge, a test of faith. This difference, as I said, is not merely aesthetic, it's profoundly theological. It speaks to our deepest longings, our most fundamental questions about the nature of God. Do we seek a God who comforts us in our sorrows, who guides us in our uncertainties? Or do we seek a God who challenges us to grow, who pushes us beyond our comfort zones? Do we want a God who fits neatly into our preconceived notions, or a God who shatters those notions, who reveals the vastness and mystery of the divine? And then, the question of the Imago Dei, the image of God. Who, in this grand drama, truly bears that image? Is it Moses, the reluctant prophet, struggling with his own doubts and fears? Is it the enslaved Hebrews, crying out for liberation? Is it even Ramses, trapped in his own cycle of power and pride? Or is it perhaps all of them? For the Exodus story reminds us that the image of God is not confined to the powerful or the righteous. It is present in the broken, the marginalized, the oppressed. It is present in every human being, regardless of their circumstances. And it is in the liberation of these people that the image of God is truly revealed. Let us then begin this exploration. not as passive observers, but as active participants, as fellow seekers on this journey into the heart of the Exodus. Let us dare to wrestle with these questions, to confront the mysteries of faith, and to discover the God who is both near and far, both immanent and transcendent. 1998. The Prince of Egypt and post-Cold War optimism, the zeitgeist of hope, the late 90s, a time when the world seemed to exhale after the long tense standoff of the Cold War. There was a sense of possibility, a feeling that the old walls, literal and metaphorical, were crumbling. The internet was burgeoning, connecting people across continents, fostering a sense of global community. And in this atmosphere of hope, the Prince of Egypt emerged, not merely as a film, but as a cultural sacrament. It was a moment when Hollywood, often accused of superficiality, dared to engage with sacred narrative, to explore the depths of biblical truth. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a collective act of storytelling, a communal attempt to rediscover the roots of our shared human story. The film's very existence was a testament to the idea that even in a secular world, the yearning for the sacred remains. This period was marked by a desire for unity, for reconciliation. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of apartheid, these were not just political events. They were symbolic moments, signs of a world longing for healing. The Prince of Egypt resonated with this longing, offering a vision of liberation that transcended religious boundaries. The film's interfaith collaboration was not just a marketing gimmick, it was a genuine attempt to find common ground, to build bridges of understanding. It was a moment of ecumenical hope, a belief that even in our diversity, we could find a shared humanity. It was a time that people wanted to see the best of humanity and to believe that the world was becoming a better place. But as we reflect, we must ask, was this optimism grounded in reality, or was it a form of wishful thinking? Did we mistake the absence of overt conflict for true peace? Did we confuse technological connection with genuine human communion? The prophet's vision of a world where nation shall not lift up sword against nation is not merely a political ideal. It's a spiritual imperative. It's a call to transform the human heart, to overcome the forces of division and hatred. The Prince of Egypt offered a glimpse of this vision, but it also raised the question, can we truly build a world of peace without addressing the deeper roots of human conflict? Music as liturgy. And then there was the music. Those soaring melodies, those powerful harmonies, they weren't just background noise, they were an integral part of the film's message. They became a form of liturgical expression, a way for audiences to participate in the story, to experience its emotional and spiritual depth. There can be miracles when you believe. This wasn't just a catchy tune, it was a declaration of faith, a communal act of hope. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can rise above adversity, that the impossible can become possible. It spoke to the deep human yearning for transcendence, for a world where the chains of oppression are broken, where the light of justice shines brightly. The music tapped into something primal, something deeply human. It resonated with the rhythms of ancient lament and the melodies of spiritual yearning. It became a way for people to express their own hopes and fears, their own longing for liberation. It was a time of believing, even when evidence to the contrary was still present. It was a moment of true faith. It was a reminder that faith is not just about intellectual assent. It's about emotional engagement, about allowing the story to touch our hearts, to transform our lives. In those moments in the theater, People were not just watching a film, they were participating in a collective act of spiritual communion. However, we must also consider the potential for escapism. Did the film's uplifting message provide a temporary respite from the harsh realities of the world? Or did it inspire genuine action? Did it encourage us to confront the injustices in our own lives and communities, or did it allow us to remain complacent? These are questions that we must continue to grapple with as we reflect on the legacy of the Prince of Egypt and its place in the history of sacred storytelling. 2014, Exodus, Gods and Kings, and the Age of Cynicism, The Shadow of Disillusionment. By 2014, the world felt heavy, burdened by the weight of unfulfilled promises. The echoes of the 90s optimism had faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The global financial crisis, the rise of extremist ideologies, the seemingly endless cycles of conflict, these events had eroded our trust in institutions, in grand narratives, in the very idea of progress. Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings arrived in this context, a film that seemed to embody this disillusionment. It wasn't just a retelling of a biblical story, it was a reflection of our collective anxieties, a mirror held up to our fractured world. The film's portrayal of God as a child, unpredictable and sometimes cruel, wasn't just a creative choice. It was a symptom of our spiritual malaise, a sign that we were struggling to reconcile the concept of divine goodness with the reality of human suffering. This era was marked by a deep skepticism, a questioning of established truths. The internet, once hailed as a tool for connection, had become a breeding ground for misinformation and division. The rise of social media had amplified our voices, but it had also exposed our vulnerabilities, our capacity for cruelty and manipulation. In this climate of uncertainty, the very foundations of faith were being questioned. Was God still present in a world that seemed to be spiraling out of control? Or had we, in our hubris, pushed God away, leaving ourselves adrift in a sea of despair? Exodus, Gods and Kings captured this sense of spiritual unease, this feeling that we had lost our way. It was a film that dared to ask difficult questions, even if it didn't offer easy answers. The violence depicted in the film wasn't just gratuitous, it was a reflection of the violence that permeated our world. The stark, almost brutal realism of the plagues, the graphic depictions of warfare. These elements spoke to a generation that had grown accustomed to seeing violence on their screens, in their news feeds. It was a reminder that the biblical stories are not sanitized tales of good versus evil. They are raw, visceral accounts of human conflict, of the struggle between power and oppression. The film's ambiguity, its refusal to offer simple moral judgments, reflected our own moral ambiguity, our own struggle to navigate the complexities of a world where the lines between right and wrong had become blurred. The theological implications of casting, the controversy surrounding the casting choices, wasn't just a matter of political correctness, it was a theological issue. It raised fundamental questions about the nature of representation, about the ways in which power and privilege can distort our understanding of sacred stories. The white savior narrative, however unintentional, undermines the very essence of the Exodus story, which is about God's liberation of the oppressed. It perpetuates the colonial mindset, the idea that only a Western hero can rescue a non-Western people. It ignores the agency of the enslaved Hebrews, their own struggles, their own faith, their own resilience. It is a reminder that even our best intentions can be tainted by the blind spots of our cultural contexts, that our own biases can shape our interpretation of sacred texts. This issue goes beyond mere representation. It touches upon the very nature of divine revelation. Who has the right to tell these stories? Whose voices are heard and whose are silenced? The Exodus story is not just a historical event. It's a living tradition, a narrative that belongs to all who seek liberation. By casting European actors as Egyptians, the film effectively erased the voices of the marginalized, the very people whose story it was supposed to be telling. It was a missed opportunity to engage in a genuine dialogue with the cultures and communities that have preserved and cherished this narrative for centuries. It highlighted the importance of humility, of recognizing our own limitations, of listening to the voices of those who have been historically excluded from the conversation. The casting choices also highlighted the danger of projecting our own cultural assumptions onto sacred texts. The Exodus story is not a blank canvas for our own interpretations. It has its own integrity, its own historical and cultural context. The challenge for us is to approach these stories with humility and respect, to listen to the voices of those who have preserved and interpreted them for generations. This is not just a matter of academic rigor. It's a matter of spiritual integrity. It's a reminder that our understanding of God is always partial, always limited, always in need of correction. The burning bush. Intimacy versus alienation. The theophany encounter. The burning bush. Not merely a plot device, but a sacred rupture in the fabric of the ordinary. A theophany, a divine manifestation, a point where the transcendent breaks into the immanent. It is a place of profound encounter, a moment that forever alters the course of Moses' life, and indeed, the course of history. But how that encounter is depicted reveals much about how we ourselves envision the nature of God. In The Prince of Egypt, the bush is a spectacle of vibrant, swirling energy. It's almost as if the very essence of God is being poured out, a visual and auditory symphony that overwhelms the senses. This isn't just a fire. It's a consuming, transformative experience, a moment of profound intimacy, where Moses is drawn into the very heart of the divine. It is the God who is close, the God who desires connection. It's a depiction that resonates with the mystical traditions, where God is experienced through wonder and awe, a God who invites us into a partnership, into co-creation. Contrast this with Exodus Gods and Kings. Here, the bush is stark, almost desolate. The encounter is more cerebral, more ambiguous. The presence of the child God adds an element of unsettling mystery, a sense of divine otherness that is both intriguing and unsettling. It's a God who seems to keep his distance, a God whose purposes are inscrutable, perhaps even alien. This is not a God who invites intimacy, but a God who demands obedience, who operates beyond the realm of human comprehension. It's a depiction that reflects our contemporary anxieties, our sense of alienation in a world that often feels cold and indifferent. It reflects the difficulty of believing in a God that seems to have withdrawn or that is acting in ways we cannot understand. Both interpretations in their own way are valid, for the nature of God is indeed a mystery, a paradox that defies easy explanation. But which interpretation resonates more deeply with our own spiritual longings? Which one ignites the fire of faith within us, compelling us to action, to liberation? Do we seek a God who walks beside us, who comforts us in our sorrows and strengthens us in our struggles? Or do we seek a God who remains aloof, a distant observer, a cosmic force that operates according to its own inscrutable logic? The answer to this question shapes not only our understanding of God, but also our understanding of ourselves, our place in the world, and our responsibility to others. The declaration of presence. And then there is the divine name, The I am who I am, not a definition, not a theological formula, but a declaration of presence, a revelation of God's very being. It's a reminder that God is not bound by our categories, that the divine transcends our limited understanding, and yet, in the very act of revealing this name, God chooses to make himself known, to enter into a relationship with humanity. This is the paradox of the burning bush, the simultaneous experience of divine mystery and divine intimacy. It is the sense of being both overwhelmed by the vastness of God's presence and embraced by the warmth of God's love. In The Prince of Egypt, the I am resonates with power and majesty, a voice that fills the space, a declaration that echoes through the ages. It's a moment of profound awe, a recognition of God's sovereignty, but also a moment of profound hope, a promise of liberation. In Exodus, Gods and Kings, the I am is more subdued, more enigmatic, perhaps even more unsettling. It's a reminder that God's ways are not our ways, that the divine logic is often beyond our grasp. It's a moment that challenges us to confront our own limitations, to surrender to the mystery of God's presence. In the end, the burning bush is not just a visual spectacle, it's a spiritual encounter, a moment of profound revelation. It's a reminder that God's presence is not confined to temples or scriptures, but can be found in the most unexpected places, in the midst of the ordinary, in the heart of the desert. The challenge for us is to open our eyes, to open our hearts, to recognize the burning bush in our own lives, to hear the divine voice calling us to liberation. The bush is a symbol of endurance, a metaphor of the struggles of those who are oppressed. It burns, but is not consumed. It is a symbol of hope and of the promise that even though the world seems to be on fire, that God is still present and that liberation will come. Moses and Ramses' brotherhood versus tyranny, the microcosm of conflict. The relationship between Moses and Ramses is not merely a subplot, it's a window into the very soul of the Exodus narrative. It's a microcosm of the larger conflict between oppression and liberation, a personal drama that reflects the cosmic struggle between good and evil. In The Prince of Egypt, their bond is deeply human, deeply flawed, deeply tragic. It's a tale of fractured love, of childhood friendships twisted by the corrupting influence of power. Ramses's lament, "You were the brother I chose," is a heart-wrenching confession, a poignant reminder of the human cost of tyranny. It's a story that resonates with the biblical themes of betrayal and reconciliation, of the struggle to maintain human connection in the face of overwhelming forces. The film dares to explore the inner lives of these characters, to show us their vulnerabilities, their doubts, their capacity for both love and cruelty. This approach allows us to see the humanity of both characters, even in their worst moments. It makes it harder to paint one as purely evil and the other as purely good, which is far closer to the reality of the human condition. In Exodus, Gods and Kings, their relationship is more abstract, more symbolic. They are reduced to archetypes, to opposing forces in a grand cosmic battle. While this approach may be visually spectacular, it lacks the emotional depth, the nuanced complexity of the animated film. It's a story that emphasizes the external conflict, the clash of armies, the spectacle of divine power, but it neglects the internal conflict, the struggle within the human heart, the battle between love and hate, between compassion and cruelty. The biblical narrative, however, is not just about political liberation. It's about the liberation of the human heart, the transformation of the soul. It's about the struggle to break free from the chains of sin, the chains of fear, the chains of pride. The film that leans into the personal, leans into the heart of the biblical message. Consider the theological implications. The Prince of Egypt reminds us that even those who wield power are still human, still capable of love, still capable of redemption. It challenges us to see the image of God in all people, even those we consider our enemies. Exodus, Gods and Kings, with its focus on external conflict, risks dehumanizing the characters, turning them into mere symbols of good and evil. This approach can lead to a dangerous simplification of the biblical message, a failure to recognize the complexity of human nature and the universality of the struggle for liberation. The theological imperative, the call to let my people go, is not merely a political demand, it's a theological imperative. It's a declaration of God's justice, a reminder that God is on the side of the oppressed, that He hears the cries of the suffering. It's a call to break down the walls of division, to build bridges of understanding, to create a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect. The choice between brotherhood and tyranny is not just a choice for Moses and Ramses. It's a choice that we all face. Do we choose to build bridges, to heal divisions, to foster reconciliation? Or do we choose to perpetuate cycles of violence and oppression, to cling to power and privilege at the expense of others? This choice is not just about our actions, it's about our hearts. It's about our willingness to confront our own biases, our own prejudices, our own capacity for cruelty. It's about our willingness to see the face of God in those who are different from us, those who are marginalized, those who are oppressed. The Exodus story is a call to conversion, a call to transform our hearts, to become agents of justice and peace in a world that desperately needs both. It's about choosing love, even when it's difficult, even when it's painful, even when it seems impossible. It is a reminder that we are all brothers and sisters, that we are all created in the image of God, and that we are all called to build a world where that image is honored and respected. The story of Moses and Ramses reminds us that even the most powerful of leaders are still subject to the human condition. They are still capable of making mistakes, of being influenced by their own desires and fears. This is a humbling reminder that power does not equate to perfection, and that even the most well-intentioned leaders can be led astray. It is a warning against hubris and a call to humility. David Jasper's The Sacred Body embodied theology, the flesh of revelation. David Jasper in The Sacred Body offers a profound challenge to our often disembodied understanding of sacred narratives. He invites us to recognize that these stories are not mere intellectual constructs, abstract theological propositions. They are lived realities, etched into the flesh, imprinted on the very bones of the marginalized. The Exodus story, in its essence, is a story of embodied suffering and embodied liberation. It's not just about ideas. It's about the physical, visceral experience of oppression, the raw, agonizing reality of slavery. When we see the Hebrew slaves in The Prince of Egypt singing their lament, their bodies moving in a rhythm of pain and hope, we witness this embodied theology in its rawest form. Their songs are not just melodies, they are cries from the depths of their souls, a collective groan that pierces the heavens, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to resist, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. Each note, each movement is a prayer, a plea, a declaration of faith. Their bodies themselves become altars, and their songs a living sacrifice. Exodus, Gods and Kings, with its silent, almost anonymous masses, misses this crucial dimension. It reduces the enslaved to mere props in a spectacle of power, their humanity obscured by the grandeur of the visual effects. This is not just a matter of artistic choice, it is a theological failure, a profound misreading of the Exodus narrative. To silence the voices of the oppressed is to silence the very voice of God, to deny the sacredness of their suffering, to erase their lived experience. It is a form of spiritual violence, a denial of their inherent dignity as bearers of the Imago Dei. Jasper's concept of the sacred body reminds us that God's presence is not confined to temples or scriptures. It is found in the sweat, the tears, the very breath of those who suffer, in the calloused hands of the laborer, in the weary feet of the refugee. It is in the brokenness of the human body that we often encounter the divine most profoundly. When we honor the bodies of the marginalized, we honor the image of God within them. We acknowledge their humanity, their dignity, their right to liberation. The Exodus is a testament to this truth. God hears the cries of the oppressed, and He acts to liberate them. This is not just a historical event, it is a timeless promise, a reminder that God's justice is not an abstract concept, but a concrete reality embodied in the lives of those who suffer. The theology of lament and liberation. The Hebrew slave's lament is not just an expression of pain, it's a form of resistance, a refusal to be silenced, a declaration of hope. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can find ways to express its longing for liberation. This lament is a form of prayer, a cry for divine intervention, a plea for justice. It's a reminder that God is not indifferent to human suffering, that He hears the cries of the oppressed, and that He acts to liberate them. The Exodus story is a story of God's solidarity with the suffering, a testament to God's commitment to justice and liberation. It is a reminder that God is not neutral in the face of oppression, but actively intervenes to liberate the oppressed. The concept of embodied theology also challenges us to reconsider our own relationship to suffering. Are we willing to embrace the suffering of others, to stand in solidarity with the marginalized, to work for justice and liberation, or do we prefer to remain detached, to ignore the cries of the oppressed, to maintain our own comfort and privilege? The Exodus story is a call to action, a call to embody the spirit of liberation in our own lives, to become agents of justice and peace in a world that desperately needs both. It is a challenge to move beyond abstract ideas and to engage with the concrete realities of human suffering, to recognize the sacredness of every human body, and to work to create a world where all people can live with dignity and freedom. The very act of remembering, of telling the Exodus story, is an embodied act. It's a way of keeping the memory of suffering alive, of honoring the sacrifices of those who have gone before us, of committing ourselves to the ongoing struggle for liberation. It's a reminder that the work of justice is never finished, that each generation must find its own way to embody the spirit of the Exodus. Edward Said's Orientalism, the white savior myth, construction of the other. Edward Said's Orientalism is not just a critique of academic discourse, it's a profound exploration of the ways in which power and knowledge intersect to create and perpetuate systems of domination. He exposes the insidious nature of the Orientalist gaze, the tendency of Western culture to construct the Orient, the East, as an exotic, inferior, other, a realm of mystery and decadence, a place ripe for conquest and control. Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings, despite its intentions, falls prey to this colonial gaze. The casting of European actors as Egyptians, the whitewashing of a story that is inherently rooted in the Middle East, perpetuates this othering process. It reinforces the notion that only a Western face, a European hero, can embody the qualities of leadership, of righteousness, of divine favor. It is a subtle but powerful form of cultural imperialism, a denial of the agency and dignity of the people whose story is being told. The myth of the white savior is a particularly insidious form of this othering. It suggests that non-Western peoples are incapable of self-determination, that they are dependent on Western intervention for their liberation. This is not just a matter of representation. It is a distortion of the Exodus narrative, a narrative that is fundamentally about God's liberation of the oppressed through the leadership of a man who himself was born into oppression. Moses, in his biblical context, was a reluctant leader, a man who grappled with his own identity, his own limitations, his own doubts. He was not a flawless hero, but a flawed human being, chosen by God to be an instrument of liberation. The Prince of Egypt, while not without its own imperfections, at least attempts to give voice to the marginalized. The Grammy-winning gospel rendition of "Deliver Us" is a powerful example of this. It is a fusion of Hebrew lament and Black spiritual resistance, a testament to the enduring power of the Exodus story to inspire liberation across cultures. It is a moment where the oppressed find their voice, and the power of God is found in the collective cry of those who are suffering. The issue here is not merely about historical accuracy, it's about the theological implications of these choices. It's about the ways in which our cultural assumptions can shape our understanding of sacred texts, how our biases can blind us to the complexities of history and the richness of diverse cultural experiences. The theological problem of othering. The concept of othering is not just a sociological phenomenon, it's a theological problem. It denies the inherent dignity of all human beings created in the image of God. It creates artificial divisions, erecting barriers of prejudice and discrimination that separate us from our brothers and sisters. The Exodus story is a call to break down these barriers, to see the face of God in every person, regardless of race or ethnicity, regardless of cultural background or social status. It's a reminder that God's love is universal, that His justice is for all people, that His liberation is for all who are oppressed. The challenge for us is to reclaim these sacred stories from the distortions of colonialism, to tell them in ways that honor the voices and experiences of the marginalized, to recognize the inherent dignity of all human beings. This is not just a matter of political correctness. It is a matter of theological integrity. It's about our commitment to truth, our willingness to confront our own biases, our responsibility to be faithful stewards of the sacred narratives that have been entrusted to us. It's about recognizing that the work of liberation is not just about freeing others. It's about freeing ourselves from the chains of prejudice and ignorance. It's about building a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect, where the image of God is honored in every human being. It's about acknowledging the complexity of the human story and making room for the voices that have been historically silenced. By allowing the voices of the oppressed to be heard, by recognizing their agency and their resilience, we not only honor their humanity, but also deepen our understanding of God's liberating work. We recognize that liberation is not something that is imposed from the outside, but something that arises from within, from the depths of the human spirit, empowered by the grace of God. This understanding is crucial for building bridges of understanding, for fostering reconciliation, and for creating a world where justice and peace prevail. The Prince of Egypt, Liturgy for the Oppressed, the film as sacred ritual, The Prince of Egypt has transcended the boundaries of mere cinema. It has become a cultural and spiritual touchstone, a living liturgy for the oppressed. Its songs, imbued with the power of both ancient scripture and modern musical expression, have found their way into the very fabric of religious observance. They are not simply melodies. They are prayers, anthems of hope that resonate with the deepest longings of the human heart. In Passover Seders, the plaintive cries of "Deliver us" echo the ancient lament of the Hebrew slaves, making their suffering palpable, their liberation a present reality. In Christmas pageants, the soaring harmonies of "When You Believe" become a testament to the transformative power of faith, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, hope can prevail. These moments are not just reenactments, they are acts of spiritual communion, where past and present converge, where the ancient story becomes a living experience. When Miriam's "Deliver Us" is sung in Black Lives Matter protests, the Exodus story breaks free from its historical confines, becoming a potent symbol of contemporary struggles for justice. It becomes a cry for liberation from systemic oppression, a call for an end to racial injustice, a demand for a world where all lives are valued. This is the power of sacred narrative, to transcend time and space, to speak to the universal human experience, to inspire action, to transform lives, to give voice to the voiceless. It's not just entertainment, it becomes prayer, a communal expression of longing, a collective act of resistance. The film, through its music, becomes a vehicle for spiritual mobilization, a way for people to connect with the divine, to find strength in community, to embody the spirit of liberation. The film's impact is not limited to formal religious settings. It has become a cultural artifact, a shared experience that resonates with people of diverse backgrounds and beliefs. It has become a way for families to introduce their children to the biblical story, to engage them in a meaningful dialogue about faith, justice, and the power of hope. It has become a tool for interfaith dialogue, a way for people of different religious traditions to find common ground, to build bridges of understanding. It's a reminder that sacred stories belong to all of humanity, that they speak to the universal human experience, that they have the power to unite us in our shared longing for liberation. Anamnesis and the ongoing exodus. The concept of anamnesis, the act of remembering, of making the past present, is central to the Jewish and Christian faiths. When we retell the Exodus story, we are not merely recalling a historical event. We are participating in it. We are making it alive in our own time. We are joining the ranks of those who have struggled for liberation throughout history. We are becoming part of the ongoing exodus. The Prince of Egypt has become a powerful vehicle for this anamnesis, a way for new generations to experience the power of God's saving grace, to connect with the ancient story, to find inspiration for their own struggles. This act of remembering is not just about the past, it's about the future. It's about our commitment to the ongoing work of liberation, the ongoing struggle against oppression. It's about our responsibility to create a world where all people are free, where justice prevails, where the promise of the Exodus is fulfilled. The film, by bringing the story to life in a vivid and compelling way, invites us to become active participants in this work, to embody the spirit of liberation in our own lives, to become agents of change in our own communities. The legacy of the Prince of Egypt is not just about its artistic merit or its commercial success. It's about its enduring power to inspire hope, to foster community, to ignite the fire of faith. It's about its ability to transform lives, to give voice to the voiceless, to remind us that even in the darkest of times, the light of liberation can shine brightly. It's a testament to the enduring power of sacred narrative to shape our understanding of the world, to inspire our actions, to transform our lives. It's a reminder that the Exodus story is not just a story of the past. It's a story for our time, a story for all time. The film reminds us that liturgy is not just for the sanctuary, but for the streets, for the homes, for the hearts of all who yearn for freedom. Exodus, spectacle or warning? The hollow echo of spectacle. Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings may have achieved a degree of box office success, a fleeting moment in the spotlight, but its legacy ultimately serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the pitfalls that await when sacred narratives are reduced to mere spectacle. In an age of technological wizardry, where CGI can conjure worlds of breathtaking beauty and terrifying realism, the film's sterile, almost clinical visual effects serve as a chilling reminder that stories of liberation demand more than pixels and polygons. They demand soul. They demand a deep engagement with the human condition, a willingness to confront the complexities of power and oppression, a commitment to authenticity that transcends the superficial allure of technological prowess. The film's failure to connect with audiences on a deeper, more meaningful level is a testament to the importance of authenticity, of telling stories that resonate with the lived experiences of the marginalized, of allowing the human heart to speak through the medium of cinema. The film's reliance on technological spectacle, its emphasis on visual effects over emotional depth, created a sense of distance, a feeling of detachment from the human drama at the heart of the Exodus story. The characters, often reduced to mere pawns in a grand cosmic chess game, lacked the emotional resonance, the human vulnerability that would have allowed audiences to connect with their struggles. The violence, though visually stunning, felt gratuitous, lacking the moral weight, the spiritual gravity that would have made it truly impactful. In an age of deep fakes and AI, we must be especially vigilant against the temptation to replace human connection with technological wizardry, to prioritize visual spectacle over emotional truth, to sacrifice authenticity on the altar of technological innovation. The danger is that we become so enamored with the tools that we forget the purpose of the story itself. The film's legacy is not just a matter of cinematic failure, it's a theological warning. It's a reminder that sacred narratives are not commodities to be exploited for entertainment, but living traditions that demand reverence, respect, and a deep commitment to truth. It's a call to reclaim these stories from the distortions of commercialism, to tell them in ways that honor their spiritual depth, their moral complexity, their enduring relevance to the human condition, the peril of distraction, and the promise of amplification. The danger of spectacle is that it can distract us from the true meaning of the story, from the profound theological and moral questions that it raises. It can turn the Exodus into a mere entertainment, a diversion from the real work of liberation, a fleeting escape from the challenges of our own lives. The challenge for us is to use technology in ways that enhance our understanding of these sacred narratives, not to replace it, not to diminish it. We must use technology to amplify the voices of the marginalized, to create spaces for dialogue and reflection, to build bridges across divides, to foster a deeper understanding of the human condition. We must be mindful of the ways in which technology can be used to perpetuate systems of oppression, to silence dissenting voices, to manipulate public opinion. We must be vigilant against the creation of digital echo chambers, where we are only exposed to information that confirms our existing biases. where we are shielded from the perspectives of those who are different from us. The challenge for us is to use technology to promote dialogue, to foster empathy, to build a more just and compassionate world. We must use these tools to connect with the human heart, not to bypass it. The Exodus story, in its essence, is a story of liberation, a call to break free from the chains of oppression, a promise of a new beginning. The challenge for us is to use technology in ways that serve this purpose, to use it to empower the marginalized, to amplify their voices, to create a world where all people can live with dignity and freedom. This is not just a technological challenge, it's a moral imperative, a spiritual calling. It's a reminder that our humanity is not defined by the tools we create, but by the ways in which we use them. The film's legacy is a call to discernment, a call to remember that the stories we tell and the ways we tell them shape the world we inhabit. Let us choose wisely. The next Exodus, the ever-unfolding narrative. The Exodus is not a relic of the past, a story confined to dusty scrolls and ancient temples. It is a living, breathing narrative, an ever-unfolding testament to God's enduring commitment to liberation, a promise that echoes through the ages, a call to action that resonates in our own time. It is a story that refuses to be contained, that bursts the boundaries of history, that speaks to the universal human yearning for freedom, for justice, for a world where all are treated with dignity and respect. As new voices rise, women who challenge the patriarchal structures that have silenced them for centuries, queer individuals who reclaim their rightful place in the divine narrative, people from the global south who demand recognition of their own rich and diverse spiritual traditions, the promised land expands, the horizon of liberation widens. The Exodus is not a destination, but a journey, a continuous movement toward a more just and compassionate world. We are all called to participate in this ongoing exodus, to become agents of change, to reimagine divinity beyond the confines of colonial frames, beyond the limitations of our own prejudices and biases. The challenge before us is not just to interpret the past, but to create the future, to build a world where all people are free, where justice and peace prevail, where the promise of the Exodus is fulfilled. This is not just a utopian dream, a fanciful ideal. It is a divine imperative, a command that echoes from the very heart of God, a call to embody the spirit of liberation in our own lives, in our own communities, in our own world. For as long as we wrestle with these stories, for as long as we seek to understand their meaning, God walks with us in the desert, guiding us toward the promised land, illuminating the path with the light of truth and justice. This journey is not without its challenges, its trials, its moments of doubt and despair. But the Exodus story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail, that even in the face of overwhelming odds, liberation is possible. It's a reminder that God's grace is sufficient, that the divine presence is always with us, that we are never alone on this journey. A call to action and a vision for the future. The final text overlay, "You shall tell your children, we were slaves and now we are free," is not just a historical mandate, a command to remember the past. It is a call to action, a summons to participate in the ongoing work of liberation, a reminder that the struggle for justice is never finished, that each generation must find its own way to embody the spirit of the Exodus. It is a call to pass on the torch of hope, to ensure that the memory of liberation is kept alive, that the promise of a better world is never forgotten. And as we continue to tell these stories, as we continue to grapple with their meaning, we must remember that they are not just about the past, they are about the future, about the world we are called to create. They are about our responsibility to be stewards of God's creation, to build a world where all people can flourish, where all voices are heard, where all are treated with dignity and respect. They are about our commitment to justice, our dedication to peace, our unwavering belief in the power of hope. They are about our willingness to be instruments of God's love, to be agents of change, to be beacons of light in a world that often feels dark and uncertain. The Exodus is a story of transformation, a story of redemption, a story of hope. It's a story that reminds us that even in the midst of chaos, even in the face of despair, even in the shadow of death, new life can emerge, liberation can be found, the promised land can be reached. It's a story that invites us to believe in the impossible, to have faith in the unseen, to trust in the power of God's love to transform the world. Let us then embrace the spirit of the Exodus. Let us embark on this journey of liberation. Let us create a world where the promise of the Exodus is fulfilled, where all are free, where all are one. Let us not only tell the stories, but live them. The journey and the question. We've journeyed through two cinematic landscapes, two distinct interpretations of a story that has echoed through millennia. We've witnessed how the alchemy of art transforms ancient scripture, how our own cultural lenses, shaped by the currents of history, refract the light of divine revelation. We've seen how the grand narrative of Exodus, a story of liberation, resonates across generations, cultures, and even through different artistic mediums, from the vibrant strokes of animation to the stark realism of live action. But this journey is not merely an intellectual exercise, it's a spiritual pilgrimage, a confrontation with the very heart of our faith. And so, the real question remains, echoing in the silence after the final frame: what does this story mean for us today, in this moment, in this world? Are we merely passive observers, detached spectators in a grand drama? Or are we called to be active participants, co-creators in the ongoing work of liberation, agents of change in a world that desperately needs it? This is not a question for scholars alone, but for every human heart that yearns for freedom, for every soul that cries out for justice. It's a question that demands a response, a commitment, a willingness to engage with the challenges of our time, to embody the spirit of the Exodus in our own lives. The mirror and the internal pharaohs. The Exodus is a mirror, reflecting our own struggles against oppression, both internal and external, personal and communal. It's a reminder that liberation is not just about breaking free from physical chains. It's about breaking free from the chains of fear, prejudice, and injustice that bind our hearts and minds. It's a call to confront the pharaohs within ourselves, the ingrained biases, the hidden resentments, the subtle forms of domination that hold us captive, that prevent us from fully embracing the freedom that God offers. It's a call to examine our own complicity in systems of oppression, to acknowledge our own privilege, to repent of our own sins. It's to look into our own hearts and see where we are the ones that hold others in bondage. It's a reminder that God's promise of freedom is not just for a chosen few, a select group of the righteous, but for all creation, for every human being, regardless of race, religion, or social status. It's a promise that extends to the very fabric of the cosmos, a vision of a world where all creation groans for liberation, where all creatures are restored to their rightful place in the divine order. As we leave this exploration, let us carry with us the spirit of Exodus, a spirit of courage, resilience, and unwavering hope, a spirit that empowers us to confront the challenges of our time, to embrace the risks of liberation, to trust in the power of God's love to transform the world. The power of story and the blueprint for the future. The stories we tell shape the world we inhabit. The narratives we embrace define our understanding of reality. The myths we perpetuate determine our actions. By reclaiming and reimagining sacred narratives, by challenging dominant ideologies and exposing the distortions of power, we have the power to build a more just and compassionate future. The Exodus is not just a story of the past, a historical relic to be studied and analyzed. It's a blueprint for the future, a roadmap for liberation, a call to create a world where all people are free, where justice and peace prevail, where the promise of God's kingdom is fulfilled. It's a call to create a world where we build tables, not walls. It is a reminder that we are not passive recipients of history, but active participants in its unfolding. We are not mere spectators in the grand drama of redemption, but co-creators with God, partners in the ongoing work of liberation. The Exodus story invites us to step into this role, to embrace our responsibility, to become agents of change, to build a world where the light of God's love shines brightly, where the promise of liberation is made real in the lives of all people. Let us then go forth and be the Exodus. We are all a part of the ongoing story. What part will you play? Thank you for accompanying us on this exploration of divine narratives and their post-colonial interpretations. If this journey into the depths of sacred storytelling and its cultural impact has touched you, we invite you to join the Hope in God community. Subscribe for more theological reflections. Share your own experiences of encountering the divine in film and scripture, and let us continue together, finding hope in every step of our shared pilgrimage towards a deeper understanding of God's liberating work in the world.